Have you ever listened to a young child tell a story when they're either really excited or very frustrated? They may start out with this, steady flow of information, and then right in the middle, they will stop and repeat themselves and have verbal hiccups. And all of that is just completely normal. That's what happens in human beings when big emotions take over. Feeling temporarily overrides speaking. Feeling something profound and fully experiencing that thing does not usually lead to a tidy retelling of events. It often leads to pauses that aren't yet the end. You know this if you've ever interrupted the child before the end of the story. The way I see it, this is what's going on at the end of Mark's gospel. And this is also what makes Mark a really useful resurrection story for a lot of us. Something big happened there. Something big happened, and it robbed even the grown-ups of their words for a little while. Do you want to hear the story the way it was first written? If you have a Bible with you, you may want to take one out and flip to Mark chapter 16, because this is kind of surprising, and you may not believe it if you don't see it for yourself. But there are extra words in Mark that were not meant to be there. Mark is the earliest account of the good news of Jesus, and its last section or chapter has just 8 lines in it. That is 8 verses in chapter 16, then come more words under the heading, endings added later. That's how it looks, at least in our common English Bibles, which we most commonly quote in this room. Over in traditional worship, they have NRSV Bibles, and that one says, shorter ending of Mark, longer ending of Mark. Here I give you the no-add version. I'll read it from the Message Bible. When the Sabbath was over, Mary Magdalene, Mary, the mother of James, and Salome brought spices so they could embalm him. Very early on Sunday morning, and as the sun rose, they went to the tomb. They worried out loud to each other, who will roll back the stone of the tomb for us? And then they looked up and saw that it had been rolled back. It was a huge stone. And they walked right in. They saw a young man sitting on the right side, dressed all in white, and they were completely taken aback, astonished. He said, "Don't be afraid. I know who you're looking for. Jesus of Nazareth, the one they nailed on the cross. He's been raised up. He is here no longer. You can see for yourself that the place is empty. Now go on your way. Tell his disciples and Peter that he is going on ahead of you to Galilee. There you will see him exactly as he said." They got out of that tomb as fast as they could, beside themselves, their heads swimming, stunned. They said nothing to anyone. At this point in the story, that's the story. Another translation says, the women were overcome and terrified, so of course, they said nothing to anybody. Isn't that kind of great? I'm not being sarcastic. I really actually mean this. After giving it a lot of thought, I am naturally attracted to this ending. I like it because it's curious and it's weird, and it makes me ask, why is that there? And why does it end like that? I wonder if you want to lean in to this ending the way I do, or does it just rub you the wrong way? Does it disturb you? Do you find it uncomfortable? Is there this piece of you that just demands a better ending, that just wants the story to keep going? All the responses are allowed. All of them are appropriate and okay. The text invites everything that we feel about it. For my part, I really do think it's great that Mark leaves room to adjust to the reality of resurrection. He does not rush past the shock. When he stops writing, the reign of God is still emerging. I love that. Granted, my position is probably still in the church minority because the majority of church leaders, at least the ones that were in charge from the 3rd through the 5th centuries, well, they outvoted me 1600 to 800, 1800 years ago. They built the Bible we know in a different way because they found Mark to be deficient and incomplete. So they changed it. Some things you should know about that. While Matthew comes first in our New Testament, Mark really is the first in chronological order. It was finished maybe 20 years before the others. It's written as if in a hurry. Mark uses the word immediately more times than anyone else. There is a sense of urgency to what he's doing here. Like many other accounts from the front lines of history, it skips some of the setup and explanation to just focus on the action. Let's record the action. And Mark's account was already in use by Christ-following communities long before there were other gospels, long before there were an agreed-upon set of writings that make up a canon we call Holy Scripture. But as church leaders saw the need for our Bible, a need I also see, work I'm really grateful for, they decided Mark had some problems, and they picked out the biggest problem as its ending. Did you notice that Jesus doesn't even appear as a character in this story of Jesus reappearing? Logically, we get that. If we're good readers, we notice that's because the young man inside the tomb said he has gone on to Galilee, and this action is taking place in Jerusalem. But that was not good enough for the early church. That worried people that Jesus didn't physically show up yet, because they were already worried that Mark had not done enough across the board to prove Jesus is who Jesus actually says he is. So now, if you can just imagine like an early church council as a marketing meeting in corporate America, the argument from the creatives was kind of like this. We want more market share. We want this Jesus thing to take off and to go, and Mark's resurrection is not selling it. We're going to have to edit that copy. So multiple additional endings were penned to try to fix the problem. 2 were shorter, 1 was longer. The longer one got selected for a really popular English translation that a lot of other translations later leaned on, and that is how, through the King James Bible, pictured here, we get Mark 16, verses 9 through 19. But scholars could always see evidence of the edit. It left a mark. The words at the end don't match all the other words from the beginning and the middle. The language and the style is all wrong, and the earliest manuscripts just didn't have those words in them. What's more, that longer ending repeats phrases from Gospels written after Mark's was done, indicating those words are newer, not original. It has been known that people added to this Gospel account. And I want to tell you, I'm sorry they felt they had to. I'm sorry. They felt that need because I think Mark's original is so real, so important, and pretty imperfectly perfect, just the way it is. I think Mark makes space for the rest of us to feel our way into new life. That is not a small order, and that is not a fast task. Maybe I appreciate Mark because I've lived stunned and overwhelmed myself. I've been in a state of fright or flight so paralyzing that I know how much harder it is to process any news, even really good news, when you're just surviving. Jesus' friends are in the rubble in Mark. The earth has just shifted beneath their feet. And yeah, it's absolutely true that a new and different life was emerging, but only just. At this point in the story, they are processing a huge supernatural event in real time. They probably didn't have it worked out enough to talk about it for a minute. That just makes sense to me, because I know the bigger the thing I'm going through, the harder it is for me to work it out enough to put it into words. I love Mark for what it is. a real life account with missing details and no neat conclusion. Exactly what you'd expect from people experiencing the biggest feelings of their life, people in the biggest event of their lifetimes. And how valuable it is to me that our Bible leaves us an account of a really big thing that nearly destroyed some good people before it re-anchored them into a life of overwhelming joy. It wasn't just the grief of recently losing Jesus that shook and silenced the women. It was awe, shock and awe combined, I think. They had come face to face with who Jesus really, really is. Just like them and not at all like them. Jesus, unmistakably human because he died, and divine because he's not dead anymore. Just thinking about that changed everything about their lives, and they hadn't figured it all out yet. They didn't know how to live now, so they were afraid. I've been afraid, and so I know there is power in an honest report from the messy middle of it. Right? Some of you know too. If you've ever lost someone important to you through death or a break in relationship, if you've ever had to change your life plan because the first one fell apart, or maybe the second one, if you've ever woken up after a hard, long day in the middle of the divorce during the treatment and said to yourself, I don't even know how I feel today. Well, then you realize that the women at the tomb of Jesus act completely normally. They are refreshingly honest. Since the second week of Lent, I've been working through grief because my mom died that week. And that brings up the grief of my dad dying about 3.5 years ago. All the days since early 2022 have been filled with trauma and sickness surrounding my parents. And on my best days, I do not say fine when people ask me, how are you? When I can reach in and pull out some honesty, I shrug, because sometimes I don't know. Occasionally I say, let me think. I check in with myself, and I usually say something like, well, I'm okay right now. I might not be again by the end of the day. Or, well, I'm doing pretty well, hanging in there. I'm proud of how I'm hanging in there. I say that a lot. And it's all true because I am okay and not okay at the same time. And even that bit of honesty before you, that refreshing bit of honesty waters my dry and dusty soul. There is real power in letting a story be what it is while it's still playing out. Don't rush it to its conclusion. That is vulnerable and brave and honest and true. And in the case of Mark, I think it gives credit where credit is due. Because early church leaders really underestimate us as readers if they thought we couldn't figure it out. If they thought we can't fill in an intentionally left blank, well, they just didn't give us enough credit. Because we get it. We absolutely get it. Mark ends on a pause. His account is simply an ending, not the ending. It's a moment in time, not the end. Like every hard thing, you and I already have or will live through the most confusing parts, the most shocking parts, the hardest to process parts. Well, they're just a time in our lives. They're not our whole lives. There are days when we feel stuck in something that weighs us down, like maybe we are buried beneath it. And we'll stay that way until something inside us starts to shift. But those days are not the end of us. I'm here to say, and you can tell each other in all your stories, that those days are not the end of us. Because hard things don't kill us or even separate us from our help. Not even death can separate our spirits from the people we have loved or the essence of us from God. That's thanks to Jesus who defeated death. We can assume that the women got past the one verse of Mark 16:8 and went on to share the good news that Jesus is alive. I mean, how else would we even be hearing the story if they never said a word to anyone? Because remember, Mark's is the first gospel, written closest to first-person accounts of what happened as it happened. And these women are the first to bear witness to resurrection. Their testimony about what they saw, what they heard, well, it helped create those communities that Mark's gospel was useful to. I say Mark respects his readers enough to leave us to fill in some blanks, maybe even to put ourselves into the role of bearing witness to resurrection. And also, it's worth saying, it's so worth saying, every time we retell this Easter story, we should trust the women. However they react, we should listen up, because the women are the most credible witnesses we have. You did catch that the they at Jesus' tomb early on Sunday morning was exclusively only women. They were the same ones who witnessed Jesus' crucifixion when the male disciples had run away. They are the same ones who followed Jesus' limp body into a hastily arranged tomb late on a Friday afternoon. And no male disciples did that with them. These are the same women who actually saw Jesus' body put away at the place that they would return Sunday morning. They were the only ones who saw Jesus in a grave. And now that Sabbath is over and the law allows, they're back to finish the job of embalming their friend's body. These women, more than what's named, scholars would tell you, these women are Jesus' friends. They're his followers. They're his financial supporters. His own mother is most likely in the group of them. And at this point in the resurrection story, they've been more personally up close affected by Jesus' death than anyone. They're still wrecked, but they find it in themselves to show up today. They're not even sure that they could get to Jesus' body, but they show up, and then they find the place available, but no Jesus at all. And we see what's going on there. We don't need any more words to tell us that Jesus' absence from the grave is the sign. It's the message. Jesus is out in the world again. Jesus is on the move again. Jesus is going about the business of God. And I say Mark did just fine relaying all that. The first Easter story was never meant to be the end point in Christ's existence or in our faith. The first Easter story is not a hard stop. It's a pause to catch up. It's a moment of big feeling for the women and us too. I offer us one last theological thought and then one practical thought in closing. This is the best good news I came to when reading Mark this week. I believe it makes our Easter story more sacred if we halt in the smooth telling of it. I think that means we are feeling it. And the feeling of new life coming after the death of anything, of any other life we've known and expected to be ours, well, it's a lot to take in. We're going to need a minute. I believe we should allow whatever messy feelings come up in the middle, knowing that is not the end of the story. That's, in fact, what we celebrate today. That's the party, friends, is that the story isn't over yet. If it's true of Jesus' resurrection day, it's true for all of us still today. If you're stuck in a moment right now, feeling buried by the weight of it, you are very likely in a pause, but not the end. And maybe that helps shift the weight. Before anything else changes, maybe you can just say to yourself, a pause, but not the end. The big day we're in, this celebration of resurrection, means that nothing is the end of us. And there is more to come for all of us who love and look to a risen Lord. So may it be among us.